All right, welcome. Today, we're going to crack open a piece of equipment that's a total mystery to a lot of people, but an absolute lifesaver for your pipes and appliances. We're talking about the water softener.
Yeah, you've probably seen that big tank sitting in your garage or basement. You know you have to lug those heavy bags of salt to it every so often, but have you ever stopped to wonder what is actually going on inside that thing? How does it take hard, crusty water and make it soft? Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain and find out. Okay, so the real magic, the absolute hero of this whole story, is something called resin media. Just imagine millions of tiny, super powerful little beads. Their entire purpose, their only job, is to snatch the minerals that make your water hard. We're talking mainly about calcium and magnesium. So to really get a handle on this, you only need to understand two things. A water softener basically has two different modes, or cycles. First, you've got the service cycle. That's its day job, what it's doing 99% of the time, softening your water. And then you have the regeneration cycle. Think of this as its deep cleaning mode, which it has to run every once in a while to keep doing its job.
So let's start with the big one, the service cycle. This is the system's default setting, right? It's the main reason it exists, and it's what's happening pretty much all the time, to give you that nice, treated water.
And you know what? The process itself is surprisingly simple. Your regular hard water comes in at the top of the tank. Then, gravity just does its thing, pulling the water down through that big bed of resin beads we mentioned. As the water trickles through, bam, the resin just grabs onto all that calcium and magnesium. What's left? Soft water, which then flows up a tube in the middle and out to the rest of your house. Simple as that.
The easiest way to think about it is this. Every single one of those tiny little resin beads is like a super strong magnet, but it's a special magnet. It's only attracted to hardness minerals. So as the water flows by, those minerals get yanked right out of it, leaving the water perfectly soft.
But you know, there's a catch. Just like a magnet that gets covered in so many metal filings it can't pick up anymore, these resin beads eventually get totally coated with those hardness minerals. They're full. They can't grab anything else. And that is the signal that it's time for the system to clean itself off and hit the reset button. And these things are pretty smart, you know? The system is constantly keeping track of how much water it's softened, and when it figures out that its capacity is running low, that those resin beads are almost full, it automatically schedules that deep clean we talked about, the regeneration cycle. Yeah, and we're not just talking about a quick rinse here. The regeneration cycle is a very specific, multi-step process. This is where all that salt you've been lugging finally comes into play. It's used to give those resin beads a serious scrub down, getting them totally clean and ready to go back to work. Okay, so the whole cleaning process kicks off with a couple of important prep steps. First, the system has to mix up its cleaning solution. And second, it needs to kind of fluff up the resin bed to get it ready. So let's look at these first two parts, the brine tank fill and the backwash. Now this first part is actually really clever. To make its cleaning liquid, the system doesn't just use any old hard water from the tap. No way. It actually takes some of the perfectly soft water that it just finished making and sends it back into the salt tank. Why? Because soft water is way better at dissolving salt. It creates this super concentrated cleaning solution we call brine. And a nice little bonus for you is that this keeps the inside of your salt tank from getting all gunked up. All right, next up is the backwash. This is pretty cool. The system completely reverses the flow of water, pushing it up from the bottom of the tank. This rushes upwards, lifting and tumbling all those resin beads. It's kind of like shaking out a dusty rug or fluffing up a pillow. It's a physical cleaning that gets rid of any dirt or sediment that might have gotten trapped in there. So, with all the prep work out of the way, it's time for the main event. This is the heart of the cleaning cycle. We've got the brine draw, that's when the real cleaning happens, and then it's followed by a final rinse to get everything back to normal.
And here we go. This is the moment we've been waiting for. The system starts to suck that super salty brine solution out of the salt tank and pulls it slowly, deliberately through the resin tank right over all those beads that are just covered in hardness minerals.
And here's our really interesting detail. In some systems, as that salty brine is drawn in, a little chlorine generator actually kicks on. It uses the chloride that's already in the salt to create a tiny bit of chlorine. So what's that for? It basically helps to disinfect the whole system every single time it regenerates. Pretty neat, huh?
So this is the key to everything. The sodium from the salt water literally knocks the calcium and magnesium right off of the resin beads. It's like a trade. The resin actually prefers the hold on to the sodium, so it lets go of the hardness minerals. And where do those minerals go? They get flushed right down the drain. The resin is now recharged and holding on to sodium atoms instead.
Okay, we're almost there. The deep clean is basically done.
The resin beads are now sparkling clean and free of all those hardness minerals. But now they're sitting in a tank full of salty water. So the system has one last job to do before it can get back to business.
And that last step is a final rinse. Plain, fresh water gets pushed through the tank one more time. This is super important because it flushes out all of that leftover brine. It gets rid of any excess salt, making absolutely sure that none of it ends up in your home's water supply.
And just like that, we're done. The whole regeneration cycle is complete. The system flips a switch, goes right back into service mode, and it's fully recharged and ready to get back to its day job, making sure you have great, soft water.
So the system uses all that salt, but what's actually left in your water? See, that's the key thing to remember. The softener isn't adding salt to your water. It's performing an exchange. It's swapping out those hard minerals, the calcium and magnesium, for a very small amount of sodium. It's a pretty amazing little bit of chemistry happening quietly in your home every single day. Thanks for diving into this with us, and we'll catch you on the next one.